Hey guys, Coach Coker asked me to come give you guys a math lesson today, so here I am. We got to get this done quick because I got to go get some pizza. Alright, I don't need this sword for the lesson. So, what we're going to talk about today is factoring trinomials. Now this is pretty simple, but sometimes people have a hard time with it. So, we're going to look at this trinomial. You're going to look at what's in front of the x squared. All the problems we're doing today don't have anything in front of the x squared. Alright? So when this is a 1, then what we're doing is we're factoring, which is basically we're dividing. We're trying to figure out the two things that multiply together to get this trinomial. So, if we are going to factor this, we know that if there's going to be two things that are going to multiply to get this, then we're going to set those two things up like this, two binomials, okay? And remember, if we were undoing FOIL, or we were going backwards from FOIL, if we were going to do FOIL, we would know to get x squared at the beginning, I would have to have x times x. So those are pretty simple. The other thing that makes our life easier is we look at this plus right here. If we have this plus, then both of these signs are going to be whatever this is. So both of these are positive. I can go ahead and put positives there. Now, what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for the number, or the numbers that will multiply to get this and add to get the middle term. Okay, so I've got to multiply to get 2, and I've got to add to get 3. Well, it's pretty simple because there's only one way to multiply to get 2, and that's 2 and 1. Okay, so x plus 1 times x plus 2. Okay, if I need to, I can check my loops. When I say check the loops, we're going to say the inside loop is 1 times x. The outside loop is 2 times x. And if those two things equal what we got up here, then we know we have the right answer, which is this. Okay? Now, once again, really, really simple as long as I know the ways that I can multiply to get that. Sometimes it's not quite as easy because there's more than one way. So, for instance, if I come over here and I've got x squared plus 14x plus 45. Okay, when I have that, there's a bunch of different ways to get 45. So I've got to come up with the ways to get 45 that are going to add up to 14. So the best thing I can do is to make a list. So I've got 1 and 45. 2 doesn't go into 45, so I go to 3. 3 and 15. 4 doesn't go into 45, I go to 5 and 9, 6, 7, and 8. None of those go into 45, and then I'm back to 9. Okay, well, once again, I'm going to look at this list. I'm going to figure out which ones of those is going to add up to 14 here in the middle. So that is 5 and 9. So I'm going to write x plus 5 and x plus 9. It doesn't matter which one I write first, the 5 or the 9, I can put them in either order. Okay, I'm going to come over here. 32 gets complicated because there's lots of different ways to get 32. Okay, so same thing, if I need to make a chart, I'll make a chart. I know I've got this x squared in the front, which makes it a little bit easier. I can just put x and x. So I've got to think through, what are my factors of 32? I've got 1 and 32. I've got 2 and 16, 3 doesn't, 4 and 8, well 4 and 8, that would add up to 12, so that's what I'm looking for. So I want to go plus 4 and plus 8. So x plus 4, x plus 8, that is my answer. Alright, same thing, I've got 48 down here, lots of different ways to get 48. So I've got 1 and 48. I've got 2 and 24. One of them that you might forget is actually 3 and 16. but none of that is going to get me 14. All those numbers are still too big. So I've got 4 and 12. Well, 4 and 12 is not going to get me 48. 5 doesn't go into it. 6 times 8 is 48, and 6 plus 8 is 14. So that's what I want to go with. I'm going to go with x plus 6 and x plus 8. Alright, so like I said, we've got pretty simple one so far. Everything was positive. We're going to look at what happens when we put some negatives in there. Okay, when we've got positives, if this number is positive and this number is positive, then that means both of the binomials are going to have pluses in them. Alright, so let's look at what happens when we get... Alright, I'm back. Here we go. We're going to look at what's going to happen if we have a negative. Alright, first of all, if we have x squared minus 5x plus 6, as long as that minus is in this middle term here, then it still keeps things pretty simple and pretty straightforward. If I've got a plus here at the back, then all that means is I'm going to do the same thing. Okay? So, I still want to find the terms that multiply to get positive 6, but now it's got to add up to negative 5. Well, what are my ways that I can multiply and get positive 6 and add up to negative 5? So I've got x and x still. Nothing's changed. I still don't have a coefficient, or that coefficient in front of the x squared is just a 1. Okay, so I've still got x and x. If this is a plus and this is a minus, both of these are going to be minus, because a negative times a negative will get me the positive that I want. But also, when I add a negative and a negative, I'm going to get a negative answer here. So, the ways to get 6, 1 times 6 or 2 times 3. Well, 2 and 3 would add up to 5, so I'm going to put the 2 and the 3. Okay? Same thing here on the next one. I've got x squared minus 7x plus 12. So I go ahead, I make my parentheses. Okay, I've got x and x. I need something that's going to multiply to get 12 and add to get negative 7. So if this is plus, this is minus. I know both of these are going to be negative. I start thinking 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Well, 3 and 4 is what's going to add to get 7, so that's what I put there. Okay, and then the same thing down here. Pretty simple stuff here. There's only one way to get a 3. This is positive, this is negative, so I've got x and x. The only way I can multiply and get 3 is minus 1 and minus 3. Alright, so that keeps everything still pretty simple. Alright, these ones over here, this is where it gets a little bit trickier, just because I've got a negative for this back number. So even though there's only one way to multiply to get 3, now that it's negative 3, I have to consider either 1 times negative 3 or negative 1 times positive 3. And I've got to consider both of those options, because I still want to multiply to get that number, and I still want to add to get this number. Okay, so I've got my x, I've got my other x, remember, because this is still a 1 here, the coefficient there is a 1, so that hasn't changed. And I want to multiply to get negative 1, so I've got to go with one of these, or to get negative 3. So I've got to go with one of these two options. I want the option that's going to make them add together to get negative 2. So that is going to be this option. So I'm going to write x plus 1 and x minus 3. Alright. Next one here. Same thing. Go ahead and write my parentheses. I've got x and x. I've got to come up with numbers that multiply to get negative 14. Okay, they're going to add to negative 5. Well, I know that 7 minus 2 is 5, and 7 times 2 is 14, so that's probably going to work. I just need to figure out which one needs to be negative. so that I can figure out how to get the negative 5. So I've either got negative 7 times 2, or I've got positive 7 times negative 2. Well, I want to pick the one that's going to get me a negative 5, which is that one. So x minus 7 and x plus 2. Alright, the negative 36. On the next one, x squared minus 16x minus 36. Okay, this one's going to be a little bit trickier just because there's lots of different ways to get 36. Okay, so you're probably going to need to write those down and just make a list. So we start with 36. We've got 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 5, and then 6 and 6, because 5 doesn't go into 36. So I need to be able to think, how can I get a negative 16 if one of these has to be negative? Okay, well, 1 and 36, if I subtract, I'm just going to get 35. Well, 2 and 18, if I subtract, I would get 16, which is perfect. That's what I want. But I want it to be negative 16, so I need to make the 18 negative. So I can say 2 and negative 18. So x plus 2 and x minus 18. Alright, and then the last one. If you want, you could pause it real quick, see if you can get this right before I explain it. So we've got x squared minus 5x minus 24. Once again, a lot of different ways to get 24. So you're going to have to make a list just like we did over there. The better you are at your times tables, the easier this is going to be. So, x and x, I go ahead and write that down. Things that get negative 24, I've got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8. Oh, 3 and 8, that might be it. So, I've got negative 5, so that means I'm going to want the minus 8 and the positive 3. Alright guys, it's been a fun time here with you today. Stay on top of your work. I'm off to get some pizza. Remember, shop local. Go Paparolos.